Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is how medieval unmarried women secretly made money. You get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. How medieval unmarried women secretly made money. If you're ready, settle into a comfortable position and allow your mind to drift gently backward through the centuries. There is no need to hurry. Tonight, we are not following the lives of kings or queens, nor the famous knights whose names fill history books. Instead, we are quietly stepping into the forgotten corners of medieval towns and villages where thousands of unmarried women lived lives that history rarely bothered to record. Imagine yourself standing just outside the wooden gates of a small European town sometime during the late 13th century. The first light of dawn is slowly spreading across the rooftops. The streets are still damp from the cool night air, and a thin layer of mist hangs over the narrow lanes. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the morning, while smoke begins curling from stone chimneys as families prepare the first meal of the day. Most people you meet here live simple lives. Farmers leave before sunrise. Blacksmiths begin heating their forges. Bakers have already been awake for hours. Merchants are arranging goods outside their shops. But among all these familiar faces are women whose stories almost disappeared from history. Many of them have never married. Some are young. Some have lost their parents. Some chose not to marry. Others simply never found a husband. In modern imagination, it is easy to assume that these women had no independence at all, that they simply waited for marriage or depended entirely upon relatives. Yet medieval life was often much more complicated than that. Survival demanded creativity, and creativity often remained hidden. Unlike wealthy noblewomen, unmarried women rarely owned large estates or inherited castles. Laws in many regions favored male inheritance, and social expectations encouraged women to become wives. Yet life seldom followed perfect rules. Wars, disease, accidents, and changing economies created countless situations where women had to support themselves, quietly, patiently, sometimes openly, sometimes in complete secrecy. As the town slowly wakes around you, notice the young woman carrying 2 woven baskets toward the marketplace. She is dressed simply, her clothing carefully repaired many times. At first glance, she appears no different from hundreds of others. Yet hidden beneath the linen cloth covering one basket lies several small packets of herbs gathered before sunrise. These herbs are not officially hers to sell. Technically, the nearby forest belongs to a local lord. Technically, gathering valuable medicinal plants without permission could lead to punishment. But hunger has a way of making legal boundaries feel less important. For many unmarried women, knowledge became a kind of invisible wealth. Long before universities welcomed female students, knowledge passed quietly between mothers, grandmothers, widows, neighbors, and traveling healers. One woman remembered where wild mint grew every summer. Another knew which mushrooms could safely be eaten. Someone else recognized plants that soothed coughs or reduced fever. These skills rarely appeared in official records, yet they helped countless families survive. Imagine walking beside this young herbal gatherer as she slips beyond the town walls before sunrise. The forest feels peaceful. Dew covers the grass. Birds sing softly from the trees. She moves carefully. She knows exactly where certain plants grow. Not because someone taught her from a book, because she has walked these paths since childhood. Every bundle she collects represents another small chance to earn enough money for bread, candles, or winter firewood. Sometimes she sells directly to townspeople, sometimes to traveling merchants, occasionally to local healers who quietly purchase herbs without asking too many questions. No official business license exists. No large sign advertises her work. Everything happens through trust, through whispered recommendations, through familiar faces returning again and again. Picture yourself entering the marketplace later that morning. The air smells of fresh bread, smoked fish, onions, damp straw, and wood smoke. Merchants call to customers. Children weave through crowded stalls. Priests pass quietly along the street. Nearby, our herbal gatherer exchanges several bundles of dried lavender for a handful of small silver coins. The transaction lasts only moments. To everyone else, it appears entirely ordinary. Yet those few coins may represent several days of careful work. Across medieval Europe, countless unmarried women earned similarly modest incomes, not fortunes, not riches, just enough to remain independent another week, another month, perhaps another year. Many people today imagine medieval economies as rigid systems where everyone remained trapped in fixed occupations. Reality was often more flexible, especially for the poor. Imagine another woman living near the edge of town. She owns almost nothing. Her small wooden house contains one table, 2 stools, a straw mattress, a clay cooking pot, and little else. But hanging from the ceiling are dozens of neatly spun bundles of wool. Every evening after completing household chores, she sits beside a small oil lamp. Hour after hour, she spins thread. The wheel turns slowly. Its quiet rhythm almost sounds like soft breathing. Spinning required patience rather than physical strength. It became one of the few occupations accessible to many unmarried women. Large cloth merchants frequently purchased thread from independent spinners. Payment remained small, yet regular. Sometimes merchants even supplied raw wool in advance, expecting finished thread several days later. In many cases, these women essentially worked from home centuries before the idea became common. The work demanded extraordinary discipline. Imagine spending 12 hours producing enough thread to earn only enough money for a simple meal. Your fingers become sore, your back aches, your eyes grow tired beneath dim candlelight. Yet tomorrow you begin again, because stopping means hunger. History often celebrates magnificent cathedrals, powerful kings, and victorious generals. Far less attention falls upon the quiet hands that spun the thread, making countless garments worn across medieval Europe. Those invisible workers included thousands of unmarried women. Some never appeared by name in surviving documents. Their existence survives only through tax records, merchant accounts, or scattered legal disputes. Even there, historians sometimes discover little clues: a payment, a rental agreement, a debt, a market fine. Each tiny record reminds us that real people once lived behind forgotten names. Now imagine yourself following another narrow street. Behind one small doorway comes the pleasant scent of beeswax. Inside sits an elderly, unmarried woman making candles. The process appears simple. It is not. She melts carefully purified wax over gentle heat. One by one, she dips long pieces of wick, again and again. Each layer cools before another is added. Hours pass. Gradually, thick candles begin taking shape. Churches constantly required candles. Homes needed light after sunset. Travelers carried smaller candles during journeys. Demand remained steady throughout the year. Some women specialized in inexpensive tallow candles made from animal fat. Others produced expensive beeswax candles purchased by wealthier customers. Neither occupation attracted much public attention. Yet both created opportunities for women willing to master the craft. As daylight slowly fades outside, notice how peaceful this workshop feels. Only the faint crackle of fire, the soft movement of cooling wax, the distant sound of evening bells. There is something timeless about such quiet work. It reminds us that history is not built only by dramatic moments. Sometimes history grows through thousands of ordinary evenings, exactly like this one. The following morning arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. A pale golden light slowly stretches across the rooftops, touching weathered timber houses one by one. The marketplace is still empty, except for a few farmers arranging baskets of vegetables, while the town well has already become a gathering place where neighbors exchange greetings in voices soft enough not to disturb the peaceful beginning of the day. Imagine yourself standing beside that old stone well. If you listen carefully, you will hear far more than the sound of water. You will hear news, not official news announced by town criers, but the kind of information that quietly shaped everyday life. Someone knows which merchant has returned from a distant city. Someone else has heard that a local family needs extra help preparing for a wedding. Another woman mentions that a wealthy widow has fallen ill and requires someone trustworthy to assist around her home. In the medieval world, information itself could become a source of income. For unmarried women especially, reputation often mattered far more than possessions. A person known to be honest, careful, and dependable could find opportunities that never appeared in written records. There were no advertisements hanging from walls, no employment offices, no newspapers listing available work. Everything depended upon conversations like these. One recommendation passed from neighbor to neighbor. One satisfied customer telling another. One quiet act of kindness remembered months later. Imagine a young, unmarried woman named Agnes, not because history preserved her name, but because thousands of women like her almost certainly existed. She owns little beyond 2 dresses, a pair of worn leather shoes, and a small wooden chest containing everything she considers valuable. Yet she possesses something difficult to measure. People trust her. Whenever a merchant leaves town for several days, he may ask Agnes to feed his chickens. A widow recovering from illness might request help cleaning her home. Parents traveling to another village sometimes leave younger children under her watch for an afternoon. None of these jobs pay much individually. A few small coins, perhaps a loaf of bread, sometimes fresh eggs instead of money, occasionally a warm meal shared at the family table. But together they create something remarkably important: a steady way to survive. Historians sometimes describe this as a patchwork economy. Instead of relying upon one occupation alone, many ordinary people earn small amounts from numerous different activities. For unmarried women, this approach often offered greater security than depending entirely upon one employer. If one source disappeared, another might remain. Imagine following Agnes through an ordinary week. On Monday, she helps card wool for a neighbor preparing thread for market. On Tuesday, she spends several hours washing linen beside the river. Wednesday brings an opportunity to carry messages between 2 nearby villages. Thursday, she watches merchants' children while their parents negotiate prices at the market. Friday morning, she gathers berries before sunrise. Saturday, she sells homemade cheese alongside an elderly relative. None of these tasks seem extraordinary. Yet together they allow her to remain independent, not wealthy, simply self-supporting. It is easy for modern eyes to overlook how remarkable that truly was. Now picture yourself walking beyond the town walls once more. The road winds gently through fields where the morning breeze moves slowly across ripening grain. A narrow footpath leads toward a small monastery. Many monasteries became unexpected places of opportunity for unmarried women. Although life inside religious communities followed strict routines, monasteries constantly required practical assistance. Laundry, gardening, preparing food, copying simple documents, cleaning guest rooms, making candles, brewing ale, growing medicinal herbs. Some women eventually entered religious life. Others remained outside while accepting temporary work whenever it became available. These arrangements rarely attracted attention. Yet they quietly connected monasteries with surrounding communities. Inside one monastery garden, an elderly brother carefully examines rows of herbs. Nearby, 2 unmarried women gently remove weeds from between the plants. The work is peaceful. The scent of rosemary mixes with lavender carried by the morning air. Bees move lazily from flower to flower. No one rushes. The rhythm of the day follows sunlight rather than clocks. Payment may come at the end of the week, or perhaps in food. Fresh vegetables, a small sack of grain, a little honey. During difficult years, receiving food could matter even more than receiving coins. Across medieval Europe, barter remained common long after coins became widely available. Money was useful. Food was essential. Many unmarried women understood this better than anyone. Imagine another quiet afternoon. A traveling merchant has arrived carrying cloth from distant regions. Bright blues, deep reds, soft greens, colors not often seen in small villages. People gather to admire the fabrics. Among them stands an unmarried woman with unusually skilled hands. She cannot afford to purchase expensive cloth herself. Instead, she offers something different. She can repair damaged garments so carefully that the stitching becomes almost invisible. Before factories produced inexpensive clothing, every piece of fabric held considerable value. A torn sleeve was not simply thrown away. A worn cloak was patched repeatedly. Old dresses became children's clothing. Children's clothing became cleaning cloths. Nothing useful was wasted. Women who mastered sewing could quietly earn respect throughout their communities. Imagine watching her work beside an open window. Sunlight falls gently across folded linen. A needle passes through cloth with calm precision. Every stitch is nearly identical. Hours disappear unnoticed. Outside, carts rattle across uneven streets. Church bells mark another passing hour. Inside, only patience matters. Some customers pay in coins, others offer vegetables. A fisherman leaves smoked fish. A farmer promises firewood before winter. Every exchange strengthens another small relationship. Another thread in the invisible network that allowed ordinary communities to survive. As evening slowly approaches, let your thoughts wander toward the edge of the forest once again. There, beneath towering oak trees, another small group of women quietly gathers fallen branches. Collecting firewood might seem ordinary today. In many medieval regions, however, forests belonged to powerful landowners. Rules determined who could cut living trees, who could gather fallen wood, who could allow animals to graze, yet customs varied enormously from place to place. Sometimes local people enjoyed ancient rites, sometimes they did not. Unmarried women often learned exactly which areas could be used safely. Experience mattered. Knowing which forester looked the other way. Knowing which paths remained quiet. Knowing when to arrive before others. Bundles of firewood became another modest source of income. Heavy to carry, slow to collect, but always needed, especially during long winters. Imagine lifting one of those bundles onto your shoulder. It is heavier than expected. Every step back toward town requires determination. The road feels longer beneath its weight. By the time evening arrives, tired muscles ache from the effort. Yet tomorrow someone will gladly exchange a few coins for dry wood, ready to burn. Sometimes history survives through magnificent castles standing proudly for centuries. Other times it survives only through worn footsteps, disappearing into woodland paths. The lives of countless unmarried women belong to that quieter kind of history. They rarely commanded armies. They rarely appeared in royal chronicles. No songs celebrated their daily labor. Yet entire communities depended upon people exactly like them. The elderly neighbor living alone, the merchant needing trustworthy assistance, the monastery requiring herbs, the traveler searching for repaired clothing, the family purchasing candles before winter. Every ordinary task formed part of a much larger picture. A picture in which survival depended less upon grand achievements than upon steady, patient work, carried out day after day. As dusk settles over the town once more, windows begin glowing with the gentle light of candles, carefully made by unseen hands. The marketplace grows quiet. Smoke rises peacefully into the cooling evening sky. Somewhere nearby, a spinning wheel begins turning again. A needle passes carefully through worn fabric. A pot of herbs dries above a small fire. Another unnoticed day has ended. Another day of quiet determination. And without realizing it, you have already met several women whose hidden work kept the medieval world quietly turning, even though history almost forgot to remember their names. Night slowly gives way to another peaceful morning. A thin layer of mist rests upon the fields beyond the town, softening every outline as the first rays of sunlight gently reach across the landscape. The world feels wonderfully quiet. Even the birds seem to begin their songs one by one, never rushing the arrival of a new day. Imagine yourself following a narrow lane that winds between modest wooden cottages. Their walls lean ever so slightly with age, their roofs patched countless times over many long winters. Small gardens surround nearly every home. Cabbages grow beside onions. Herbs fill tiny corners, and climbing beans wrap themselves around rough wooden poles. To modernize, these gardens may seem ordinary, but for many unmarried women, they were something far greater. They were opportunities. Every handful of herbs, every basket of vegetables, every carefully tended fruit tree represented another chance to earn a little income without attracting much attention. In medieval Europe, very few people wasted land. Even the smallest patch of soil could become productive. An unmarried woman might grow parsley, sage, thyme, fennel, or leeks, not only to feed herself, but also to sell whatever remained after her own needs had been met. The profits were never large, yet small profits earned consistently often proved more valuable than waiting for one great opportunity that never arrived. Picture yourself kneeling beside one of these tiny gardens. The earth is cool beneath your hands. Morning dew still clings to the leaves. The scent of damp soil mixes gently with the fragrance of fresh herbs. Nearby, an elderly woman carefully pinches away damaged leaves while quietly humming a melody she probably learned decades earlier. She has no written gardening guide, no printed calendar. Instead, her knowledge has come through observation. She knows which herbs dislike heavy rain. She remembers which vegetables survive late frosts. She understands how the moon, the seasons, and the weather often shape each year's harvest. This wisdom cannot easily be measured, yet it possesses enormous value. Sometimes neighbors exchange seeds. Sometimes they exchange advice. Knowledge itself becomes another kind of currency. Many unmarried women discovered that teaching others could also create opportunities. Not formal teaching, nothing resembling a school, but practical instruction. A younger girl preparing for adulthood may spend afternoons learning spinning, weaving, sewing, bread making, or preserving food under the guidance of an experienced neighbor. The family might offer payment, perhaps a few coins, perhaps food, perhaps future assistance whenever needed. These quiet arrangements rarely appeared in official documents, yet they strengthened entire communities. Imagine sitting beside a warm hearth during one long winter evening. Outside, snow falls silently across the rooftops. Inside, several young girls gather around an older, unmarried woman. She demonstrates how to repair torn clothing without leaving visible stitches. Her hands move slowly, patiently. Every movement carries years of experience. The girls watch carefully. Questions are answered with gentle smiles. Mistakes are corrected without anger. By the end of the evening, everyone has learned something useful. No certificates are awarded, no records are written, yet valuable skills have quietly passed into another generation. Now let your thoughts wander toward a nearby river. The water moves steadily over smooth stones, reflecting the soft colors of the afternoon sky. Women have gathered here with baskets overflowing with linen. Washing clothing may sound like simple labor, but in many towns it became reliable paid work. Wealthier households often possessed more garments than they could easily maintain. Busy merchants preferred hiring someone else. Priests required clean robes. Travelers occasionally paid to have dusty clothing washed before continuing their journeys. The work itself demanded strength. Heavy, wet fabric weighs far more than dry cloth. Water remained cold for much of the year. Hands cracked during winter, yet experienced washerwomen developed remarkable efficiency. Imagine hearing the steady rhythm of fabric striking smooth stones. Water splashes gently. Voices drift softly across the riverbank. Someone laughs. Someone shares yesterday's news. Someone quietly mentions another family searching for dependable help. Even while washing clothes, new opportunities appear. Work often led to more work. Trust led to recommendations. Recommendations led to survival. As afternoon slowly unfolds, let us enter another corner of the marketplace. A traveling merchant has spread his goods across a wooden table. Among the crowd stands an unmarried woman carrying a basket filled with eggs. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. But look more closely. The eggs come from several neighbors. Rather than each family spending hours at the market, they have asked her to sell everything together. In return, she keeps a small portion of the earnings. Today we might call this a service. Back then it was simply practical. Many unmarried women quietly acted as trusted middlewomen, not wealthy merchants, not powerful traders, simply reliable people connecting buyers with sellers. Some delivered cheese from nearby farms, others carried butter, fresh herbs, wool, honey, even handmade soap. Each successful exchange strengthened their reputation. and reputation remained one of the greatest forms of wealth available to ordinary people. Imagine spending years becoming known throughout a town as someone who always keeps her promises. Customers begin seeking you rather than the other way around. Neighbors recommend your services. Strangers become familiar faces. Your greatest possession is no longer the contents of your home. It is your good name. Medieval society depended heavily upon personal reputation, especially among those with little money, without banks, without formal contracts for every agreement. Trust became essential. Now imagine another woman living alone on the edge of town. She keeps several beehives. The gentle buzzing fills the warm afternoon air. Beekeeping required patience rather than great wealth. Honey served as one of the few natural sweeteners available throughout much of medieval Europe. Its value remained surprisingly high. People purchased honey for cooking. Monasteries needed it. Brewers used it. Healers mixed it into remedies. Beeswax brought additional income. Every hive produced 2 valuable resources instead of 1. The beekeeper works slowly. She understands that frightened bees become dangerous. Smoke drifts gently across the hive entrance. The insects remain calm. Piece by piece, she removes sections filled with golden honey. Sunlight catches every drop. Sweet scent fills the air. Months of careful attention have finally produced today's reward. Yet success never comes without uncertainty. A harsh winter, heavy rain, disease among the bees. Any of these could destroy an entire season's work. Still, many women accepted such risks because independence often required courage. As evening approaches, once again, church bells echo gently across the valley. The day's work begins drawing to a close. Smoke rises from hundreds of chimneys. Families gather around simple meals. Children grow quieter as darkness settles over the town. Inside one modest cottage, an unmarried woman carefully opens a small wooden chest. Within it lie only a few possessions. Several neatly folded coins, a silver brooch inherited from her mother, a pair of carefully mended gloves, a bundle of dried lavender tied with faded ribbon. Nothing inside of the chest would impress a nobleman. Yet every object tells a story. Every coin represents long hours of patient labor. Every possession has been earned through quiet determination rather than inherited privilege. History often remembers magnificent treasures buried beneath castles. But perhaps these humble collections mattered even more because they represented something deeply personal. The ability to provide for oneself, the freedom to make small choices, the quiet dignity of independence in a world that often expected unmarried women to depend entirely upon others. As darkness gently covers the medieval town, candles begin glowing behind tiny windows. Once more, a spinning wheel turns softly in one house. A kettle simmers quietly in another. Someone finishes mending a cloak before sleep. Someone counts tomorrow's market goods. Someone thanks God for another day of honest work. These peaceful routines unfolded thousands upon thousands of times across medieval Europe. Most passed unnoticed. Most were never written down. Yet together they formed the hidden foundation upon which everyday life quietly rested. And somewhere in that quiet darkness, another unmarried woman is already planning tomorrow's work, knowing that her future, like so many before her, will depend not upon fame or fortune, but upon skill, patience, and the quiet confidence that she can once again earn enough to greet another sunrise. The sun rises slowly over the medieval countryside, painting the fields with soft shades of gold and pale green. The cool morning air carries the scent of damp earth, fresh grass, and wood smoke, drifting from distant cottages. It is an ordinary day, much like thousands that came before it. Yet within these quiet hours, countless small stories are unfolding. Stories that almost no chronicler thought worthy of recording. Imagine yourself walking along a narrow path leading toward the edge of a bustling market town. The road is uneven beneath your feet. Tiny wild flowers grow between the stones. A horse-drawn cart creaks gently in the distance, while a shepherd quietly guides his flock toward fresh pasture. There is no sense of urgency. Life moves with the rhythm of the seasons rather than the ticking of a clock. Ahead stands a modest cottage where an unmarried woman has already begun her day's work. She is not spinning wool today. She is making something far more delicate. Soap. To many people today, soap is an everyday object that receives little attention. In the Middle Ages, however, good soap required knowledge, patience, and access to valuable ingredients. Animal fat had to be carefully rendered. Ashes from hardwood fires were transformed into lye. The proportions needed to be correct. Too much lye could ruin the mixture. Too little would leave the soap ineffective. There were no printed recipes, no measuring cups. Everything depended upon experience. The woman stirs the steaming mixture with slow, careful movements. The smell is strong but familiar. Nearby, several molds wait upon a rough wooden table. Hours later, the finished blocks will be left to harden. Some customers purchase them for washing clothes, others use them for personal cleanliness. Monasteries often required large quantities. Traveling merchants occasionally carried them to distant towns. Each bar of soap represents several days of preparation, and each successful sale brings another small step toward financial independence. Not every woman mastered this craft, but those who did often became known throughout their communities. Their names rarely entered history books. Yet neighbors remembered exactly who produced the finest soap. Now imagine another unmarried woman living just beyond the market square. Her home is small, but every available space has been carefully organized. Bundles of dried flowers hang from ceiling beams. Strings of onions rest against the walls. Clay jars line wooden shelves. She has become remarkably skilled at preserving food. During harvest season, fruits and vegetables appear in overwhelming abundance. Within only a few weeks, however, much of that abundance begins to disappear. Without preservation, precious food would spoil. Knowledge offered a solution. Apples became dried slices. Herbs were hung upside down beneath warm rafters. Beans were carefully stored. berries transformed into preserves, mushrooms dried beside the hearth. Fish and meat were salted or smoked whenever possible. Many unmarried women quietly earned money by preparing preserved foods for wealthier households that lacked either the time or the experience to do it themselves. Imagine entering her kitchen during late summer. Warm sunlight pours gently through a small window. The room smells of thyme, rosemary, mint, apples, and freshly cut wood. Outside, bees move lazily among flowering herbs. Inside, every shelf tells the story of careful planning. Nothing is wasted. Everything has a purpose. One customer arrives carrying baskets of freshly picked apples. She asks the woman to dry them before winter arrives. Another family brings herbs gathered from nearby fields. They know she can prepare them properly for medicinal use. Payment may not come immediately. Sometimes customers return weeks later with grain, cheese, candles, or a few carefully counted silver coins. Patience remains part of every business. As the afternoon unfolds, let your thoughts wander toward the busy marketplace once again. Crowds move gently between stalls. Voices blend together into a soft murmur. Children chase one another between baskets of vegetables. Dogs wander hopefully in search of scraps. Among the visitors walks an unmarried woman carrying a small bundle wrapped carefully in linen. Inside are embroidered handkerchiefs. Embroidery was far more than decoration. Fine stitching demonstrated extraordinary skill. Noble households often desired beautifully decorated garments, tablecloths, altar cloths, and ceremonial fabrics. Some wealthy merchants wished to display their success through elegant clothing. A talented embroiderer could quietly build a respected reputation over many years. Imagine watching her work beneath the afternoon light. Every stitch is placed with astonishing precision. Tiny flowers begin appearing across plain linen. Delicate vines slowly spread along the edges. Small birds emerge from colorful threads. Days pass before a single piece is complete. Customers pay not simply for cloth, they pay for patience. They pay for beauty. They pay for countless hours invisible to everyone except the woman holding the needle. Her hands tell the story the history forgot. As evening approaches, another opportunity quietly appears. A traveling pilgrim has reached the town after weeks upon dusty roads. His cloak is torn. His boots require repair. He needs somewhere safe to spend the night. Large inns exist in some towns, but they are often crowded or expensive. Occasionally, respectable unmarried women rented a spare room within their homes. Not grand accommodation, just a clean bed, a warm meal, perhaps fresh bread, vegetable stew, and a place beside the fire. The payment might seem modest, yet during busy seasons, welcoming travelers became another dependable source of income. Hospitality itself became a business. Picture yourself inside such a cottage. Rain begins falling softly outside. The fire crackles gently in the hearth. The traveler quietly thanks his hostess before settling onto a simple wooden bench. Neither speaks very much. There is comfort in silence. And the meal is humble. Fresh bread, a little cheese, warm broth, flavored with herbs gathered from the garden. For the traveler, it offers welcome relief. For the woman, it provides another evening's earnings. Both benefit. Across medieval Europe, thousands of similar exchanges occurred every day. Few left written records, yet together they sustained ordinary lives. Now imagine a different kind of work. One that required not strength, but memory. An unmarried woman known throughout the village for remembering family connections, local customs, and important dates. People often sought her advice before arranging marriages, settling disputes, or tracing inherited property. She possessed no official title, yet years of observation had made her an invaluable source of knowledge. In a world where many people could not read or write, memory itself became an extraordinary skill. She remembered who owed whom a favor, which field belonged to which family decades earlier, when the last great flood had damaged the mill, which roads became dangerous during winter. Her knowledge quietly solved problems. Sometimes grateful neighbors rewarded her with gifts or payment. History often celebrates written documents, but medieval society relied just as heavily upon those who carried knowledge within their minds. As twilight slowly settles over the countryside, the sounds of the marketplace begin to fade. Merchants pack away their goods. Farmers guide empty carts toward home. Church bells announce the close of another day. Inside dozens of modest cottages, candles begin flickering to life. An embroiderer finishes one final stitch before setting her work aside. A soap maker checks tomorrow's batch. A woman counts jars of preserved herbs waiting for market. Another carefully folds a few silver coins into a linen pouch before placing it beneath a loose floorboard. Not because she is wealthy, but because every coin has been earned through weeks of patient effort. Every coin represents another small measure of security in an uncertain world. These women did not seek fame. They did not expect songs to be written about them. Their greatest victories were wonderfully ordinary. A roof that did not leak. Enough bread for tomorrow. A warm fire during winter. The satisfaction of knowing that through quiet skill and unwavering determination, they had earned their own place in a world that rarely expected them to stand alone. The stars slowly appear above the sleeping town. The streets grow peaceful once more. Somewhere beyond the last row of cottages, an owl calls softly into the night. Another day has gently slipped into history, and with it, hundreds of quiet acts of labor that helped keep the medieval world alive. One careful stitch, one jar of herbs, one loaf of bread, and one honest coin at a time. Morning arrives with remarkable gentleness. A faint silver mist lingers over the fields, while the first rays of sunlight slowly awaken the roofs of the medieval town. One by one, wooden shutters open. A baker sweeps yesterday's ashes from his oven. A blacksmith pushes open the heavy doors of his workshop. Somewhere nearby, a church bell quietly welcomes another ordinary day. If you stand still for a moment, you may notice something unusual. The busiest people in the town are rarely the loudest. Their work begins before most others have even left their beds, Imagine yourself following a narrow alley where a young unmarried woman quietly unlocks the door to a tiny workshop that she rents from an elderly neighbor. The room is hardly larger than a single modern bedroom. Its walls are rough timber. Its floor is packed earth. Only one small window allows the morning light to enter. Yet within these humble surroundings, she has built something precious, a livelihood. Upon the table before her rests a collection of worn leather gloves, torn belts, cracked pouches, and damaged satchels. She is a repairer. Many people today replace worn possessions without much thought. In medieval Europe, replacing anything was expensive. Repairing it was far wiser. Leather especially carried great value. A well-made belt might last for many years. Boots could be repaired again and again. Horse bridles, saddlebags, traveling purses, and tool holders all required careful maintenance. An unmarried woman with steady hands could quietly earn respect by extending the life of these valuable belongings. She studies every damaged piece carefully before beginning. No movement is hurried. Every stitch matters. A careless repair might fail after only a few weeks. A careful one could last another year. Customers remembered quality. Reputation traveled surprisingly quickly through medieval communities. One satisfied traveler might recommend her to merchants visiting from another town. Soon, unfamiliar faces begin arriving with their own repairs, without advertising, without signs, only through trust. Now imagine another woman whose work is even less visible. She possesses beautiful handwriting. Although literacy remained limited throughout much of medieval Europe, some women learned to read and write through religious instruction, wealthy households, or unusually fortunate circumstances. These skills could become surprisingly valuable. A merchant who traveled frequently might ask her to copy letters neatly. A priest may request assistance copying prayers for private devotion. A noble household might require inventories of supplies written clearly upon parchment. Writing materials themselves were expensive. Ink, parchment, quills. Every letter required concentration. Mistakes could not always be erased. Picture yourself watching her sharpen a goose feather into a writing quill. She dips it carefully into dark ink. Slowly, graceful letters begin appearing across the parchment. Every line reflects patience. Every word carries responsibility. She understands that one misplaced number could confuse a merchant's accounts. One misspelled name might create future disputes. Accuracy becomes her greatest asset. Her earnings remain modest, yet they arrive because she possesses knowledge unavailable to many others. Knowledge quietly becomes income. As the morning continues, let us leave the town behind for a little while. The countryside stretches peacefully in every direction. Rolling hills rise gently beyond cultivated fields. Wild flowers dance beneath the soft breeze. A narrow stream winds through the valley, reflecting the brightening sky. Along its banks walks another unmarried woman carrying several woven baskets. She is searching for reeds. At first glance, they seem ordinary, tall, green, growing wherever the water allows. But in experienced hands, reeds become useful objects: baskets, sleeping mats, simple hats, storage containers, fishing traps. Countless everyday tools began as humble plants. Gathered beside quiet rivers, she cuts each reed carefully. Only the strongest are selected. The rest remain behind to grow again. This knowledge has been learned through many seasons. Harvest too early and the reeds remain weak. Wait too long and they become brittle. Nature rewards patience. Back inside her cottage, weaving begins. The reeds bend gently beneath practiced fingers. Slowly they form neat circles. Those circles become sturdy walls. Before long, another basket takes shape. Perhaps it'll carry apples, perhaps firewood, perhaps freshly baked bread. Whatever its future purpose, someone will eventually exchange food or silver for her careful craftsmanship. The basket appears simple. Its creation is anything but. Imagine the satisfaction she feels after completing another piece. Not pride born from wealth, but quiet contentment. She has created something useful, something that will serve another family for years. That feeling alone carries its own reward. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, the marketplace grows steadily busier. Travelers arrive from neighboring villages. Farmers unload vegetables. Children stare curiously at unfamiliar goods brought from distant places. Among the visitors is an elderly widow searching for someone reliable. Her eyesight has begun failing. She can no longer complete every household task alone. An unmarried woman accepts the work, not as a servant living permanently within the household, rather as occasional assistance. Several afternoons each week, helping prepare meals, sweeping floors, collecting water, reading short prayers aloud, mending clothing, providing companionship. Loneliness itself became another quiet reality of medieval life. Older people often valued conversation almost as much as practical assistance. Some women earned small payments simply by being dependable company, sitting beside an elderly neighbor, listening patiently, sharing stories, helping pass the long winter evenings. Modern history books rarely measure such work, yet it carried genuine value. Imagine entering the widow's home during a late afternoon. Sunlight falls softly across stone walls. A kettle simmers above glowing embers. The elderly woman smiles warmly as her visitor arrives. They prepare bread together. They peel vegetables. They remember neighbors who lived there many years before. The younger woman receives a modest payment before returning home, but perhaps the greater reward is something less visible. Another trusted friendship. Another household where she is always welcome. In medieval communities, relationships often became the strongest form of security. Money could disappear. Harvests could fail. But trustworthy neighbors frequently helped one another survive difficult years. As evening slowly approaches, clouds gather gently across the horizon. Rain begins falling in soft, steady drops. Most people hurry indoors. Yet inside many cottages, work continues exactly as before. Rainy weather often created opportunities. Clothing required drying beside warm fires. Extra candles were burned. People remained indoors longer. Spinning wheels turned throughout the evening. Needles moved steadily through cloth. Hands remained busy while rain tapped quietly against wooden roofs. Imagine sitting beside one of those fires. Outside, the storm muffles every distant sound. Inside, only the gentle crackling of burning logs accompanies the slow rhythm of work. An unmarried woman carefully counts the small coins she has earned over the past week. There are not many. Certainly not enough to impress anyone, but each one tells its own story. One came from repairing a merchant's satchel, another from weaving a basket, another from copying a short letter, several more from helping an elderly neighbor. None were earned quickly. All required patience. She wraps the coins carefully inside a scrap of linen before placing them inside a small wooden box. Then she closes the lid. Tomorrow she will begin again. Because survival in the medieval world was rarely achieved through one remarkable day. It was built slowly, coin by coin, season by season, year after year. As darkness settles across the countryside, thousands of similar cottages glow softly beneath the night sky. Within them, countless unmarried women continue their quiet work. Some spin wool, some dry herbs, some write letters, some prepare tomorrow's market goods. Most will never be remembered by name. No portraits will preserve their faces. No statues will honor their achievements. Yet without them, medieval towns could never have functioned as they did. They formed an invisible network of skill, patience, and quiet resilience. Their success was not measured by castles or titles. It was measured by warm meals, repaired roofs, trusted friendships, and the comforting knowledge that another day had been faced with courage. The rain gradually fades. The fire burns lower. The town grows wonderfully still. Somewhere in the distance, an owl glides silently above darkened fields. Another peaceful day has slipped gently into the past, and another chapter in the hidden lives of medieval unmarried women quietly comes to an end. A gentle breeze moves across the countryside as another morning quietly unfolds. The sky is painted with pale shades of blue, while thin clouds drift lazily above fields that have already witnessed countless generations come and go. The town is waking once again, not with noise, but with familiar routines that have changed very little from one day to the next. Somewhere a baker places another batch of bread into a warm oven. Nearby, a stable boy brushes a patient horse before the day's work begins. From an open window comes the soft rhythm of someone turning a spinning wheel. Life continues almost exactly as it did yesterday. And for many unmarried women, that quiet consistency is the greatest comfort of all. Imagine yourself walking through one of the town's narrow lanes before most people have begun their business. A young woman carefully balances 2 covered baskets across her shoulders. From outside, they appear to contain nothing unusual. Perhaps vegetables, perhaps bread, perhaps bundles of cloth. Only she knows what rests beneath the linen covers. Inside are small jars filled with fragrant oils, not expensive perfumes reserved for queens, but simple scented oils made from lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and rose petals gathered during previous seasons. Throughout medieval Europe, pleasant scents held surprising importance. Churches burned incense. Homes used herbs to freshen stale rooms. Travelers carried scented cloth to soften unpleasant smells during long journeys. Wealthier households occasionally purchased oils to perfume clothing or bedding. Creating these fragrant mixtures required careful observation. Flowers had to be gathered at the proper time, some before sunrise, others during the warmth of afternoon. The oils themselves absorbed delicate scents only through slow preparation. Nothing could be rushed. Imagine her tiny workshop. Bundles of dried flowers hang gently from wooden beams. Clay pots rest upon shelves blackened by years of careful use. The room carries a calm mixture of lavender, mint, and rosemary. Even after the fire has gone out, the fragrance remains. She carefully pours a finished oil into a small glazed bottle before sealing it with wax. A customer will soon arrive. Perhaps a traveling merchant wishing to carry a familiar scent on a long journey. Perhaps a monastery purchasing herbs for daily use. Perhaps a noble household preparing for an important celebration. Each bottle represents many weeks of patient work. Knowledge transforms ordinary flowers into modest income. As the sun climbs higher, let your thoughts wander toward another corner of the town. A small crowd has gathered near the public square. A traveling merchant has arrived with bolts of cloth from distant cities. People admire colors rarely seen in ordinary villages. Deep crimson, soft blue, rich green, golden yellow. Among the crowd stands an unmarried woman whose eyes study every piece of fabric with quiet concentration. She is not there to buy. She cannot afford such luxury. Instead, she watches carefully. Fashion changes, even in the Middle Ages, perhaps more slowly than today. But changing tastes still influenced what people wanted to wear. She notices which colors attract attention, which patterns wealthy customers admire, which materials merchants praise most enthusiastically. This information becomes valuable later, when she embroiders linen, when she repairs clothing, when she advises customers choosing thread. Without realizing it, she has quietly conducted her own form of market research. No books teach her these things. Experience does. Observation does. Patience does. Imagine spending years simply paying attention, learning not from classrooms, but from everyday life. Such wisdom often separated successful craftspeople from those who struggled. Now follow a narrow path leading toward the town's old mill. The steady turning of its great wooden wheel fills the air with a peaceful rhythm. Water rushes beneath it without pause. Farmers arrive carrying sacks of grain. Children wait nearby while flour dust floats gently through shafts of sunlight. An unmarried woman approaches carrying several small cloth bags. She has not come merely to grind grain. She has arranged something different. After milling is complete, tiny amounts of flour always remain scattered throughout the machinery. Not enough for wealthy merchants to notice. but enough for careful workers willing to gather every useful handful. Sometimes millers allowed trusted local women to collect these leftovers in exchange for cleaning parts of the mill. Nothing was wasted. Those small amounts of flour could later become bread or be sold to neighbors. It was never glamorous work. The dust-covered clothing, the lifting required strength. Yet every little opportunity mattered. Modern people often imagine success arriving through one brilliant idea. The medieval world usually worked differently. Success often arrived through dozens of tiny opportunities, gathered patiently over many years. Imagine another quiet afternoon. You find yourself beside a group of women seated beneath the shade of an enormous oak tree. Their hands remain busy while they talk. One spins wool. Another mends a cloak. A third carefully peels willow bark. Conversation flows naturally. Stories pass from one generation to another. Someone remembers the terrible winter 30 years ago. Another recalls the great harvest when apples grew larger than anyone had expected. One woman quietly shares news that a nearby village is searching for someone skilled in brewing ale. Immediately, several heads lift with interest. Information travels quickly in gatherings like these. An unmarried woman listening carefully might discover her next source of income before sunset. There were no employment notices nailed to walls. Communities themselves became living networks. Every conversation carried possibilities. Every friendship opened another door. Among these women sits Margaret. Like Agnes before her, her name represents many forgotten lives rather than one recorded individual. Margaret has become known for brewing small batches of ale. In many parts of medieval Europe, ale was consumed daily because clean drinking water was not always reliably available. Weak ale contained very little alcohol and often accompanied ordinary meals. Families brewed their own whenever possible. Yet not everyone possessed equal skill. Margaret's ale developed a reputation for consistent quality. Neighbors began asking her to brew for weddings, harvest celebrations, seasonal festivals, traveling workers. Each request brought modest payment, nothing extravagant, just enough to purchase grain for another batch. Perhaps a little extra besides. The work required early mornings, large kettles, heavy lifting, careful timing. Too much heat ruined everything. Too little spoiled the flavor. Imagine the comforting smell rising from the steaming brew. Warm grain, fresh herbs, wood smoke. The gentle bubbling continues hour after hour while Margaret patiently watches. There is almost something meditative about the process. No loud excitement, only steady attention. A reminder that good work often grows slowly. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen across the marketplace. Customers become fewer. Merchants begin packing away their goods. An unmarried woman quietly counts the day's earnings. Today has been better than expected. Tomorrow may not be. Such uncertainty became an ordinary companion throughout medieval life. There were seasons of abundance. There were seasons of hardship. A harsh frost. A failed harvest. An outbreak of illness. Any one of these could change everything. That is why so many unmarried women learned multiple skills instead of relying upon only one. If herb gathering became impossible during winter, spinning continued indoors. If sewing work slowed, candle making might increase. If the market remained quiet, neighbors still required help preserving food or caring for children. Flexibility itself became a profession. Imagine sitting beside the hearth as darkness gently settles across the town. The day's final light disappears beyond the hills. A candle flickers softly upon the table. Its warm glow falls across hands that have worked since before sunrise. Those hands carry tiny scars, small burns, calluses, evidence of years spent earning an honest living. The woman smiles quietly as she places another carefully earned coin beside the others hidden within her wooden chest. She knows she is not wealthy. She does not expect to become famous. But she has achieved something deeply meaningful. She has shaped her own survival. One careful choice after another. One skill learned after another. One ordinary day at a time. Outside, the streets fall silent beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The wind moves gently through the trees beyond the town walls. Somewhere in the darkness, another young unmarried woman is preparing tomorrow's herbs before dawn. Another is finishing a piece of embroidery. Another is stirring wax for candles. Another is quietly writing a letter for someone who cannot write for themselves. History may never remember their names. Yet if you listen carefully enough, you can almost hear their quiet footsteps echoing through the centuries, reminding us that the medieval world was sustained not only by kings, bishops, and knights, but also by ordinary women whose determination transformed simple skills into hidden livelihoods. The first light of morning arrives almost unnoticed. A soft veil of mist settles over the meadows beyond the town, while the narrow streets remain wonderfully quiet. Only a few early footsteps disturb the silence. Somewhere a stable door creaks open. A flock of geese waddles slowly toward the river. Above the rooftops, thin trails of smoke begin rising into the cool air, carrying the familiar scent of burning oak and fresh bread. Imagine yourself taking a slow walk through this peaceful town before the crowds appear. It is during these quiet hours that many unmarried women begin the most important part of their day. Not because someone orders them to, but because the morning offers something priceless. Time before the marketplace grows noisy, before customers begin arriving, before the endless responsibilities of the day quietly unfold. Inside one modest cottage, a woman sits beside a wooden table covered with small pieces of linen. She is making caps, simple linen caps. To modernize, they may appear plain, yet throughout much of medieval Europe, head coverings formed an ordinary part of daily clothing. Men, women, servants, merchants, and craftsmen often wore some kind of cap or hood. Children quickly outgrew theirs. Workers wore them until the fabric became thin. Travelers needed protection from both sun and rain. Demand never completely disappeared. The woman carefully measures each piece of cloth without using rulers marked in precise numbers. Years of practice have trained her eyes. Her fingers know the correct size almost instinctively. The scissors move slowly, the needle follows. One careful stitch after another. There is no hurry. Speed without accuracy only creates more work later. As the finished caps begin piling neatly beside her, she smiles with quiet satisfaction. Each one may bring only a few small coins, but 20 or 30 caps sold throughout the month might provide enough income to purchase flour, lamp oil, and winter firewood. Small earnings, patiently gathered, gradually become meaningful. Now imagine stepping outside once again. The morning market has begun. Farmers arrange baskets filled with onions, beans, and freshly gathered herbs. A fisherman displays his early catch upon damp, wooden boards. Nearby, an elderly, unmarried woman carries several small clay pots. At first glance, they seem empty. They are not. Inside each pot rests something carefully protected. Yeast. Long before packaged yeast existed, experienced bakers and brewers carefully preserved living cultures from previous batches of bread or ale. Maintaining healthy yeast required experience. Not everyone succeeded. Some women became known for keeping particularly reliable starters. Neighbors occasionally visited not to purchase bread itself, but to obtain a portion of the precious yeast. In return, they offered grain, vegetables, cheese, or small payments. The exchange lasted only moments, yet it reflected centuries of practical knowledge quietly passed from one household to another. No one celebrated these women with public ceremonies. Still, many families depended upon them. Picture yourself watching one such exchange. Two women speak softly. One carefully lifts the cloth covering a clay pot. The other nods with appreciation. A tiny portion is transferred into another container. Both smile warmly before continuing their day. It seems like such a small moment. Yet without healthy yeast, tomorrow's bread might never rise. History often hides its greatest importance inside the simplest actions. As the sun climbs higher, let your thoughts wander toward a quiet lane near the town gate. A traveling peddler has arrived with unusual goods collected from distant villages. Needles, buttons carved from bone, colored thread, small mirrors, combs, tiny glass beads. Among the customers stands an unmarried woman with remarkably sharp eyes. She examines every object carefully, not because she intends to buy everything, but because she understands value. She knows which items sell quickly in nearby villages, which colors children prefer, which combs break too easily, which needles are worth purchasing. Occasionally, she buys a few inexpensive items and quietly resells them elsewhere. Never in enormous quantities, just enough to earn a modest profit. Today, we might call her a small-scale trader. In her own time, she was simply someone who recognized opportunity. Many unmarried women quietly participated in these tiny networks of trade. Their businesses remained almost invisible. One basket, a few carefully chosen goods, a trusted customer here, another there, no grand shop, no expensive warehouse, only careful observation and sensible judgment. Imagine walking beside her as she travels to the next village. The journey takes several hours on foot. The road winds gently through open countryside. Wildflowers sway beside the path. Birdsong echoes from nearby trees. Although peaceful, the journey carries risks. Unexpected storms, rough roads, occasional thieves, loose animals wandering across the path. Yet she continues, because reaching another market means reaching new customers. Courage sometimes appears in very quiet forms. Now picture yourself entering a small cottage where another unmarried woman has gained a reputation unlike anyone else in the neighborhood. She is known for caring for sick animals, not horses belonging to wealthy knights, not expensive hunting dogs, but ordinary chickens, goats, sheep, milk cows. For farming families, healthy animals meant survival. A cow producing milk, a hen laying eggs, a sheep growing thick wool. Each possessed real value. Experience taught some women how to clean wounds, prepare soothing herbal mixtures, or recognize the earliest signs of illness. Modern veterinary medicine did not yet exist. Instead, generations relied upon practical observation. Sometimes these treatments worked surprisingly well. Sometimes they did not. Yet people continued seeking help from those with proven experience. Payment came in many forms. Fresh milk, butter, a small sack of grain, occasionally a few silver coins. Every successful recovery strengthened another trusted relationship. As afternoon quietly unfolds, clouds drift lazily across the summer sky. The marketplace becomes warmer. Children laugh while chasing one another between stalls. A musician softly plays a simple tune near the fountain. Not far away, an unmarried woman sits beneath a cloth canopy repairing fishing nets. The work demands extraordinary patience. Every broken knot must be carefully replaced. One overlooked tear could cost a fisherman his catch. Hour after hour she works. The damaged net slowly becomes whole once more. Nearby fishermen wait patiently. They know careful repairs save far more than purchasing entirely new nets. Many skills practiced by medieval women shared something in common. They preserved, they repaired, they restored. Rather than creating wealth through endless consumption, they created value by extending the usefulness of everyday life. Imagine how different that rhythm feels compared with many modern habits. Nothing useful is thrown away. Everything deserves another chance. Every object carries the memory of the labor required to create it. As the afternoon fades toward evening, the air begins cooling once again. Golden sunlight stretches across the rooftops. The town slowly grows quieter. Inside a modest home near the edge of the village, an unmarried woman opens a small linen pouch hidden carefully beneath loose floorboards. She removes several coins. Not many. Enough to purchase seed for next season, enough to replace worn shoes before winter, enough to face the coming months with a little less worry. She counts them slowly, then places them back exactly as before. There is no celebration, only quiet gratitude. For years she has learned that true security rarely arrives all at once. It grows little by little, like a tree, like a garden, like trust itself. Outside, twilight, settles gently across the countryside. The church bell marks the close of another peaceful day. Windows begin glowing with candlelight. The comforting smell of evening meals drifts through the streets. Somewhere someone is spinning wool beside the fire. Another woman is carefully folding embroidered linen. Another is preparing herbs gathered before dawn, and another is writing tomorrow's list of customers entirely from memory. History rarely recorded these evenings. No royal scribe considered them remarkable, yet they were the heartbeat of ordinary medieval life. Without these women, markets would have been poorer, families less secure, communities less resilient. Their work quietly stitched together the fabric of everyday society, one careful task at a time. As darkness wraps itself gently around the sleeping town, the stars appear once again above ancient rooftops. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, fresh opportunities, fresh uncertainty. And before the first rooster welcomes another sunrise, countless unmarried women will already be awake, preparing once more to earn an honest living through patience, skill, and quiet determination. Another peaceful dawn slowly unfolds across the medieval landscape. The eastern sky glows with soft shades of amber and pale rose, while the last stars quietly disappear one by one. A cool breeze drifts through the fields, carrying the scent of damp earth, wildflowers, and fresh hay. Before long, another ordinary day will begin. Merchants will open their stalls, craftsmen will unlock their workshops, and farmers will disappear into the countryside. Yet before any of that happens, many unmarried women have already been awake for hours. Imagine yourself standing beside a small stream flowing gently beyond the town walls. The water is so clear that smooth stones resting beneath the surface seem close enough to touch. Birds gather among the reeds, while tiny insects skim lightly across the calm water. A woman kneels beside the stream, carefully collecting smooth white clay from the riverbank. To many people passing by, it appears to be nothing more than ordinary mud. She sees something entirely different. Possibility. Certain kinds of clay could be used in simple cosmetics, household cleaning, pottery repairs, or even medicinal preparations. Generations of experience had taught local women which deposits were useful and which should be left untouched. Knowledge like this rarely came from books. Instead, it traveled quietly from one generation to the next. A grandmother showing a granddaughter, an older neighbor sharing advice during a long winter evening, a traveling healer exchanging information for a warm meal. Every lesson became another tool for survival. The woman fills her basket slowly. She never takes more than she needs. She understands that the river will continue providing only if treated with respect. Many medieval people depended directly upon nature. Overusing its gifts meant creating tomorrow's hardship. As the morning sun climbs higher, follow the woman back towards the town. Inside her modest home, the clay is carefully cleaned, mixed, and shaped into small portions ready for customers. Some women purchase it for washing delicate fabrics. Others use it while making simple remedies. A potter occasionally buys small amounts for specialized work. No grand fortune is made. Only another quiet source of income added to many others. That was often the secret. Rarely did unmarried women rely upon one occupation alone. Instead, they built lives from dozens of small skills, each supporting the next. Imagine another cottage standing beside a narrow lane. Its owner has become well known for something surprisingly ordinary. She rents cooking pots. At first, the idea may seem unusual. But quality iron or bronze cookware represented a significant expense. Many poorer families owned very few cooking vessels. Some possessed only one. During weddings, harvest feasts, or village celebrations, extra pots became necessary. Rather than buying expensive equipment they would seldom use, families borrowed them. The unmarried woman carefully maintained a small collection. Each pot was cleaned thoroughly after being returned. Damaged handles were repaired. Cracks were inspected. Customers paid a modest fee or offered food in exchange. The arrangement benefited everyone. The owner earned a little money. Her neighbors avoided unnecessary expense. Even the simplest household object could quietly become part of a small business. Now let your thoughts wander towards the edge of the forest once again. The air grows cooler beneath towering oak and beech trees. Sunlight filters gently through the leaves, creating shifting patterns across the woodland floor. Here walks another unmarried woman carrying only a small knife and several woven baskets. She is searching for something hidden beneath fallen leaves. Not treasure, not rare jewels, truffles. In some regions of medieval Europe, valuable fungi growing beneath the soil were highly prized. Finding them required extraordinary familiarity with the forest. Sometimes trained animals helped. Other times, experienced eyes noticed tiny clues invisible to everyone else. Many searches ended without success. Others rewarded hours of patience. The woman moves slowly. She pauses often, examines the ground, brushes away leaves, then smiles quietly. Carefully lifting the earth, she uncovers a small, dark truffle. Its appearance is plain, its value is not. Traveling merchants serving wealthy households willingly purchased such delicacies whenever they became available. Only a handful might provide enough money to support her for several days. Success depended not upon luck alone. It depended upon years of careful observation. Imagine how many unnoticed skills medieval women quietly mastered over their lifetimes. They learned the seasons, the forests, the rivers, the markets, the habits of customers, the changing weather. Knowledge accumulated slowly, almost invisibly, until it became one of their greatest possessions. By midday, the marketplace is alive with gentle conversation. The smell of fresh bread mingles with smoked fish, herbs, beeswax, and warm wool. Among the busy stalls sits an unmarried woman surrounded by carefully arranged bundles of dried flowers. Lavender, chamomile, rose petals, cornflowers. Some customers purchase them for decoration, others for herbal remedies. Some simply enjoy their pleasant fragrance inside crowded homes. She wraps every purchase neatly in linen scraps saved from old clothing. Nothing useful is wasted. Waste belonged to wealth. Carefulness belonged to survival. As you continue walking through the market, another scene quietly unfolds. A traveling scholar has stopped to rest beneath the shade of a large elm tree. His satchel is torn. Its leather strap has finally worn through after many weeks upon rough roads. Nearby, an unmarried woman offers to repair it before sunset. The scholar gladly agrees. While she works, they begin talking. He speaks of distant cities, large libraries, busy ports, magnificent cathedrals still under construction. She listens carefully. In return, she tells him about local harvests, safe roads, and nearby villages. Neither realizes it, but they are exchanging more than conversation. They are exchanging knowledge. Travelers often became unexpected sources of information. Many women quietly learned about changing markets, regional shortages, or new crafting techniques simply by listening. Useful ideas traveled alongside merchants. Innovation rarely announced itself. It arrived disguised as ordinary conversation. Later that afternoon, imagine visiting the home of an elderly, unmarried woman whose eyesight has begun to fade. Although she can no longer perform every task she once managed, she remains deeply respected. Why? Because memory has become her profession. Young craftswomen visit seeking advice. They ask which herbs survive harsh winters, which merchants always pay honestly, which villages welcome traveling sellers, which roads flood after heavy rain. She answers patiently. Decades of experience have become more valuable than youthful strength. Even as age limits certain kinds of work, wisdom creates new opportunities. Sometimes customers leave gifts in appreciation. Fresh eggs, a loaf of bread, warm wool, occasionally a few carefully wrapped coins. Experience itself becomes income. The afternoon slowly slips toward evening. Golden sunlight stretches across the rooftops. Children return home carrying bundles of firewood. Farmers guide tired horses through the town gate. Merchants count the day's earnings before carefully locking away their goods. Inside countless cottages, unmarried women continue working by the fading light. One finishes weaving a basket. Another stirs a pot of herbal ointment. Another completes the final stitches upon a linen cap promised to a customer tomorrow morning. None rush. The rhythm of their work feels almost timeless. Steady, patient, purposeful. As darkness gently settles over the town, candles begin glowing behind tiny windows. Families gather around modest meals. Stories are shared beside warm fires. Outside, the streets gradually empty until only the occasional traveler passes quietly beneath the stars. In one small cottage, an unmarried woman opens her wooden chest before going to sleep. Inside lie several folded cloths, a sewing needle carefully protected inside leather, a handful of dried herbs, a small beeswax candle, and a pouch containing the savings she has gathered through years of quiet labor. It is not wealth by the standards of kings, but to her it represents something far greater: choice, security, independence. Each coin recalls an honest day's work. Each tool reminds her of skills patiently learned over many seasons. Each possession carries a story. History often measures greatness through battles won, kingdoms expanded, or magnificent buildings raised toward the sky. Yet another kind of greatness lived quietly within homes exactly like this one. Women who transformed ordinary knowledge into extraordinary resilience, who built livelihoods not through power, but through patience, who quietly supported entire communities without expecting recognition. As the fire burns lower and the medieval town drifts peacefully into sleep, another day gently becomes part of history. Tomorrow the market will open again. The forests will once again offer herbs and firewood. The spinning wheels will begin turning before sunrise. And somewhere, another unmarried woman will discover yet another small way to earn an honest living in a world that often overlooked her but quietly depended upon her every single day. The final stars slowly fade as another peaceful morning arrives. A gentle fog rests upon the fields surrounding the town, softening the outlines of cottages, barns, and distant church towers. Dew clings to every blade of grass, sparkling quietly whenever the first rays of sunlight find their way through the mist. For a few precious moments, the world seems perfectly still. No market crowds, no ringing hammers, no shouting merchants, only birds greeting the dawn and the distant murmur of a river beginning another day. Imagine yourself following a narrow footpath leading toward a small bridge built from weathered oak. An unmarried woman walks ahead, carrying a basket that appears almost empty. She is not searching for herbs today, nor is she traveling to the market. Instead, she is collecting feathers. At first, that may sound like an unusual occupation. Yet feathers held surprising value throughout the medieval world. Soft goose feathers filled pillows and bedding. Large feathers became writing quills. Decorative feathers occasionally adorned hats or ceremonial clothing. Nothing useful was ignored. After geese or ducks were plucked during the proper season, experienced women carefully sorted every feather. The finest were cleaned and sold. Others filled cushions. Even damaged feathers sometimes found practical uses. Imagine entering her small cottage later that morning. Bundles of feathers lie drying near an open window. Sunlight catches their pale colors as they gently move with every passing breeze. The woman patiently cleans each one. Dust is removed. Broken shafts are separated. The finest quills are trimmed with remarkable care. A traveling priest may purchase several for copying sermons. A merchant needs fresh quills to record his accounts. A monastery always requires more writing tools. Every feather passes through experienced hands before beginning its next purpose. It is another quiet reminder that medieval life wasted almost nothing. Now let your thoughts wander toward the town square. A familiar merchant has returned after many weeks on the road. His cart carries goods from places most local people will never visit. Fine cloth, spices, glass beads, metal needles. But perhaps the most valuable thing he brings cannot be placed upon a table. Stories, news, information. Crowds gather to listen. An unmarried woman quietly stands among them. She asks few questions. She simply listens. She hears that wool prices have risen in a nearby city. She learns another village suffered a poor harvest. She discovers that pilgrims will soon pass through the region on their way to a famous shrine. Most people hear interesting news. She hears future opportunities. If pilgrims are coming, extra bread will be needed. More repaired shoes, additional candles, fresh herbs, simple meals, perhaps spare beds for travelers. Information quietly becomes preparation. Preparation quietly becomes income. Many successful medieval women understood this better than anyone. Imagine another afternoon unfolding inside a humble workshop. A young apprentice sits nervously beside an older, unmarried craftswoman. She has come not to purchase goods, but to learn. The older woman demonstrates how to spin finer thread without allowing it to break. The younger apprentice watches every movement. There is no written instruction, no diagrams, only careful observation. Again and again the apprentice tries. Again and again the older woman gently corrects her. Hours pass almost unnoticed. By sunset the thread has become smoother, stronger, more even. The lesson is complete. The apprentice leaves behind a small payment and sincere thanks. Teaching practical skills quietly became another hidden source of income. Knowledge once learned could support someone many times throughout life. Now imagine walking beyond the last cottages toward open pasture. Shepherds move slowly with their flocks. Beneath the warm afternoon sun, among them walks an unmarried woman carrying shears. She does not own the sheep. Instead, local farmers hire her during shearing season. The work demands strength, patience, and confidence. A frightened sheep moves constantly. Poor shearing wastes valuable wool. Experienced workers become highly respected. As each fleece falls away, another valuable resource begins its long journey toward becoming thread, cloth, blankets, or warm winter clothing. Seasonal work like this rarely lasted all year. Yet medieval people expected such rhythms. Spring brought one kind of labor, summer another. Autumn filled every day with harvesting and preserving food. Winter turned attention toward indoor crafts. The calendar itself shaped every occupation. Flexibility remained essential. Imagine pausing beneath the shade of an old apple tree. Nearby, several women quietly sort apples into different baskets. The finest fruit will be sold fresh. Slightly damaged apples become cider. Smaller ones are dried. Nothing is wasted. One unmarried woman has become especially skilled at making apple vinegar. Families purchase it for preserving food. Healers occasionally request it for herbal preparations. Households use it for cleaning. Its sharp scent fills the air as wooden barrels quietly ferment beneath the shade of a simple shed. The process takes time, weeks, sometimes months. Patience once again becomes part of the profession. Many medieval occupations rewarded those willing to wait. As afternoon gently slips toward evening, clouds gather over the distant hills. The breeze becomes cooler. Market stalls begin closing one after another. Yet work continues inside many homes. Imagine entering one such cottage. A woman carefully examines a worn wool cloak brought by a customer. The cloth itself remains strong. Only the edges have frayed. Rather than replacing the garment entirely, she carefully adds a new woven border. Hours later, the cloak looks almost new. The customer smiles with relief. Replacing it would have cost far more than repairing it. The woman receives several coins. Another satisfied neighbor leaves with renewed trust. That trust becomes tomorrow's recommendation. Over many years, quiet reputations spread farther than loud promises. As twilight approaches, another gentle scene unfolds. Children gather around an elderly, unmarried woman seated beside the fire. She tells stories while their mothers finish the evening's work. Some tales are amusing. Others teach practical lessons. How to recognize dangerous plants. How to behave respectfully toward neighbors. How to prepare for winter before the first frost arrives. Although she receives no official salary, grateful parents often repay her kindness with food, wool, or small gifts. Even storytelling held value, not because entertainment itself created wealth, but because wisdom preserved communities. Every generation depended upon those willing to pass knowledge forward. The fire burns warmly while the children listen with quiet fascination. Outside, darkness slowly settles across the medieval town. One by one, windows begin glowing with soft candlelight. The streets become peaceful once more. Somewhere a spinning wheel continues turning. Elsewhere herbs dry above a hearth. A loaf of bread cools upon a wooden shelf. A basket waits beside the door for tomorrow's market. Inside her cottage, an unmarried woman sits quietly before a small wooden chest. She opens it slowly. Within lie the simple tools of her life: a well-used needle, a carefully sharpened knife, several writing quills, bundles of dried lavender, a spool of fine thread, a handful of neatly folded coins. None of these objects would seem remarkable to a passing nobleman, yet together they represent years of determination, years of rising before sunrise, years of learning, years of careful saving, years of refusing to surrender when hardship arrived. History often speaks loudly about crowns, castles, and great battles, but beneath that louder history lived another world, a quieter one, a world built by ordinary people whose names have almost entirely disappeared. Among them were countless unmarried women who found countless small ways to earn an honest living. Not through miracles, not through sudden fortune, but through skill patiently refined, trust patiently earned, and hope quietly carried from one sunrise to the next. As the night deepens and the stars return above the sleeping countryside, and another ordinary day gently becomes part of the past, tomorrow new challenges will arrive, new customers, new opportunities, new uncertainties. Yet these women will greet them exactly as they always have, with calm hands, steady hearts, and the quiet confidence that another honest day's work is waiting just beyond the dawn. A quiet dawn settles gently over the medieval countryside. The horizon slowly brightens, turning from deep blue to soft amber as the first light reaches the tops of ancient oak trees. The town is still asleep. Only a handful of windows glow faintly where people have already begun preparing for another long day. The air is cool, fresh, filled with the familiar scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Imagine yourself walking beside a narrow lane where countless footsteps have worn smooth paths through the packed soil over hundreds of years. Every stone beneath your feet has witnessed ordinary lives unfolding, lives that history rarely paused to notice. Among those early travelers is another unmarried woman. She carries neither expensive goods nor heavy tools. Instead, she carries something almost invisible: experience. Years of careful observation have taught her exactly how people live. She knows which family expects visitors this week, which merchant recently lost a worker, which widow will soon need help preparing for winter, which monastery plans to host traveling pilgrims. This knowledge allows her to move quietly from one opportunity to another. Long before anyone spoke of networking, medieval communities depended upon relationships. A familiar face often mattered more than wealth. A trusted reputation could open doors that silver never could. Imagine entering a modest stone house where several women have gathered around a large wooden table. Winter is still months away, yet preparations have already begun. One woman cuts strips of linen, another spins wool. A third carefully repairs blankets that will soon protect families from freezing nights. The unmarried woman sitting nearest the window has become known for quilting. She takes worn pieces of fabric that others consider useless. Small scraps, faded sleeves, pieces of old cloaks. Rather than throwing them away, she stitches them together into warm quilts. Each one tells a quiet story. A patch from a merchant's worn cloak. A piece of a child's old tunic. A section of linen that once covered a wedding table. Nothing is identical. Every quilt becomes unique. Customers value not only the warmth, but also the remarkable skill required to transform forgotten cloth into something beautiful and practical. Hours pass, while the needle rises and falls through layer after layer of fabric. Outside, the wind moves gently through the trees. Inside, conversation flows softly between neighbors. Stories are shared. Advice is offered. Sometimes laughter quietly fills the room. Work and companionship exist side by side. Many unmarried women discovered that earning a living did not always require working alone. Communities often created opportunities together. Now imagine following another narrow road leading toward a nearby village. Along the way stands a small bridge crossing a peaceful stream. Beneath its shade sits an elderly woman, weaving willow branches into fish traps. The craft appears simple. It is not. Each branch must bend without breaking. Each opening must allow fish to enter while making escape difficult. Fishermen gladly purchase well-made traps because they save valuable time. The woman learned this craft from her father decades earlier. After his death, she quietly continued making them. At first, neighbors doubted whether a woman could succeed in such work. Eventually, the quality of her craftsmanship answered every question. The traps lasted longer than most others. Customers returned year after year. Respect often arrived slowly, but careful work eventually spoke for itself. As the afternoon sun warms the countryside, imagine yourself entering another busy market. Unlike large cities, this village gathers only once each week. People travel from miles away, carrying whatever they have produced. Cheese, honey, vegetables, wool, candles, simple wooden tools. The unmarried women who attend these markets understand something important. Not every customer arrives intending to buy. Many simply come to talk, to exchange news, to learn prices, to discover which goods will be needed during the coming season. Successful sellers listen almost as much as they speak. One woman notices several families asking about warm gloves. Another hears repeated questions about preserved fruit. Someone else learns that candle supplies are becoming scarce. These conversations quietly shape tomorrow's work. Without written reports or market analyses, observation becomes the greatest teacher. Imagine sitting beside one such woman after the market closes. She counts only a handful of coins. Today's earnings are modest, yet she seems content. Why? Because she has gained something beyond money. She knows exactly what customers will likely seek next month. Knowledge today becomes income tomorrow. This quiet habit of watching, listening, and adapting helped many unmarried women survive uncertain times. Now let your thoughts wander toward a peaceful monastery standing upon a gentle hill. Its stone walls glow warmly beneath the late afternoon sun. Within its gardens grows an extraordinary collection of herbs: mint, sage, fennel, angelica, hyssop, calendula. The monastery welcomes trusted local women during harvest season. Together they gather herbs destined for medicines, teas, and healing balms. An unmarried woman carefully ties bundles with simple linen thread before hanging them beneath covered walkways to dry. She works slowly. She knows excessive sunlight weakens many plants. She knows dampness encourages mold. These details matter. Every bundle must remain useful throughout the coming winter. The monks appreciate her reliability. She appreciates the steady work. Neither side grows wealthy, yet both benefit. Across medieval Europe, countless quiet partnerships like this strengthened local communities. Imagine another evening approaching. The shadows lengthen across the fields. Cattle slowly return toward their barns. Children gather kindling before darkness falls. Inside one humble cottage, an unmarried woman lights a beeswax candle and opens a small cloth pouch. From it she removes several tiny silver coins. One by one she places them upon the table, not to admire them, but to plan carefully. A portion will purchase flax for spinning. Another will replace a broken cooking pot. The remaining coins she wraps carefully inside linen before hiding them once again. Saving money required remarkable discipline. Unexpected illness, poor harvests, harsh winters, any of these could quickly consume months of careful savings. Perhaps that is why medieval people often valued preparation more than comfort. The future remained uncertain. Every careful decision mattered. Picture yourself sitting quietly beside the fire while the woman continues mending clothing beneath the candle's warm glow. Outside, the village grows wonderfully still. An owl calls softly from somewhere beyond the fields. Rain begins tapping gently upon the roof. The sound is calm, almost soothing. The woman pauses for a moment and looks toward the small wooden chest resting beside her bed. Inside are no royal jewels, no glittering treasures, only the simple tools that have shaped her entire life. Needles polished smooth through years of use, bundles of thread, a pair of sturdy scissors, several written notes from grateful customers, a few carefully protected coins. To someone else, these objects might appear ordinary. To her, they represent freedom, the freedom to support herself, the freedom to face tomorrow without complete dependence upon anyone else. It is a quiet achievement, one earned through thousands of patient hours, invisible to almost everyone around her. As the candle burns lower, the town slips peacefully into sleep. Tomorrow, another market will open. Another garment will require repair. Another traveler will arrive seeking shelter. Another neighbor will ask for herbs, candles, thread, or advice. The work will continue, as it always has. Steady, patient, honest. And somewhere beyond the darkness, another sunrise is already preparing to reveal the countless unseen women whose quiet determination helped sustain the medieval world, one ordinary day after another. The night is beginning to fade. Far beyond the rooftops, the eastern horizon slowly brightens once again, just as it has every morning for countless centuries. The stars quietly surrender to the approaching dawn, and a cool breeze carries the familiar scents of wet grass, distant fireplaces, and freshly turned earth. Imagine yourself standing upon a small hill overlooking the medieval town one final time. From here, everything appears peaceful. Smoke rises gently from stone chimneys. The church bell announces another ordinary morning. Farmers prepare their wagons, merchants unlock wooden shutters, children begin chasing one another through narrow streets. Life continues exactly as it did yesterday. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson history has left for us. Most lives are not changed by extraordinary moments. They are shaped by ordinary days, repeated with remarkable determination. Throughout this journey, we have quietly followed women whose names have almost entirely disappeared from history. They were not queens. They did not command armies. They never signed famous treaties. Few portraits preserve their faces. Almost none left behind personal diaries, yet they existed. Thousands upon thousands of them. Some lived in busy towns, others remained in isolated villages. Some survived beside monasteries, others built lives along crowded trade routes. Each faced the same simple question every morning. How can I earn enough to survive today? The answers were never easy. Some gathered herbs before sunrise, while the fields remained covered with dew. Others spun wool until their fingers became sore beneath the dim light of a single candle. Some repaired clothing that wealthy people no longer wanted to mend themselves. Others brewed ale, tended bees, preserved food, copied letters, embroidered linen, rented household tools, collected medicinal plants, cared for Elderly neighbors washed clothing beside icy rivers or sold candles, patiently dipped one layer at a time. None of these occupations promised riches. Instead, they offered something quieter, the chance to remain independent, the chance to eat another meal, the chance to face tomorrow with a little less uncertainty. Imagine one final walk through the marketplace. The familiar faces have returned. The herbal seller arranges bundles of lavender. The basket maker places another finished basket upon her stall. The embroiderer smiles warmly as a returning customer admires careful stitching completed only yesterday. Nearby, the woman known for repairing leather quietly accepts another worn traveling satchel. Nothing about these scenes appears dramatic. No trumpets announce their arrival. No crowds gather to applaud. Yet every exchange strengthens the community. Every honest trade allows another family to continue. Every carefully earned coin represents trust. This was the true wealth of many medieval women. Not overflowing treasure chests, but dependable relationships, a respected reputation, skills refined over decades, patience tested by difficult seasons. Now let your thoughts wander beyond the marketplace towards the quiet countryside surrounding the town. The forests still provide herbs. The rivers continue flowing toward distant seas. Fields once again prepare for harvest. Nature itself reminds us that survival has always depended upon careful balance. The unmarried women of medieval Europe understood this perhaps better than anyone. They wasted little. They observed everything. They adapted constantly. When one opportunity disappeared, another quietly appeared. A poor harvest meant greater demand for mending old clothing instead of purchasing new. A harsh winter increased the need for candles, preserved food, and warm blankets. A traveling merchant brought not only goods, but also information. Every change required another thoughtful response. Flexibility became one of their greatest strengths. Modern history sometimes creates the impression that medieval women possessed no influence over their own lives. The reality was far more complex. Certainly, many laws favored men. Inheritance often passed through male relatives. Guild membership could be difficult or impossible in certain places. Social expectations placed significant limits upon women's choices. These challenges were real. Yet within those limitations, countless women displayed extraordinary ingenuity. They discovered overlooked opportunities. They developed practical expertise. They built networks of trust extending across villages and marketplaces. Quiet determination often succeeded where formal power remained unavailable. Imagine sitting once more beside the warm glow of a cottage hearth. Outside, snow gently falls across the silent countryside. Inside, an elderly, unmarried woman carefully teaches a young girl how to thread a needle. The lesson seems small, simple, almost unimportant. Yet hidden within that quiet moment lies something profoundly valuable. Knowledge. Not knowledge preserved inside great libraries. Not knowledge debated by famous scholars, but practical wisdom earned through experience. How to preserve herbs before winter. How to recognize honest customers. how to stretch a small income through difficult months, how to repair rather than replace, how to earn trust slowly, one promise kept at a time. Generation after generation, these lessons quietly passed from one pair of hands to another. Most were never written down, yet they survived. Not because ink preserved them, because people did. Perhaps that is why the lives of ordinary medieval women deserve our attention. They remind us that history belongs not only to those who ruled, it also belongs to those who quietly kept society functioning every single day. The bread baked before dawn, the wool spun during endless winter evenings, the herbs gathered beneath morning mist, the candles lighting homes after sunset, the letters copied carefully by steady hands, the blankets stitched together from worn pieces of cloth, the baskets woven beside peaceful rivers, the friendships built through years of dependable work. Without these countless unseen efforts, medieval towns could not have survived. Their labor formed the invisible threads holding entire communities together. As the years passed, many of these women eventually grew older. Their hands became slower, their eyesight gradually weakened. Walking long distances became more difficult. Yet even then, their value rarely disappeared. Instead of producing goods, many became advisors, teachers, storytellers, keepers of local memory. Young women sought their guidance before beginning businesses of their own. Neighbors visited asking for advice about herbs, markets, or difficult seasons. Experience itself became another quiet occupation. In this way, their influence continued long after their busiest working years had ended. Time moved forward. Children became adults. Markets changed. Kings came and went. Wars rose and faded. New roads appeared. Old villages disappeared. Yet the quiet rhythm of ordinary life continued. Morning, work, evening, rest, morning once again. And somewhere within that endless rhythm, another unmarried woman quietly found another honest way to support herself. Perhaps history never recorded her name. Perhaps no surviving document mentions her existence. But she lived. She worked. She hoped. She worried. She laughed with neighbors. She prepared for winter. She counted carefully saved coins beneath candlelight. She looked toward tomorrow with cautious optimism. In many ways, she was no different from millions of ordinary people across every century that followed. As our journey gently comes to its end, take one final look across the medieval town. The sun has now fully risen. The marketplace is alive once again. Voices drift softly through the streets. Church bells echo across the valley. Smoke curls upward into the clear morning sky. Life continues. It always has. The greatest secret of these unmarried medieval women was never hidden treasure or mysterious fortune. Their true secret was far simpler. They understood that independence was rarely built through one great success. It was built through patience, through learning, through adapting, through earning trust, through mastering small skills that others overlooked, through beginning again each morning, no matter how difficult yesterday had been. Their lives may never fill the pages of royal chronicles. Their names may never appear upon grand monuments, yet the medieval world quietly rested upon their shoulders just as surely as it rested upon kings, merchants, monks, and soldiers. And perhaps as we leave this peaceful town behind and allow the centuries to gently fade into the distance, that is the memory worth carrying with us. History is not only the story of those who wore crowns, it is also the story of those who quietly lit the candles, baked the bread, stitched the clothing, gathered the herbs, cared for neighbors, and earned an honest living one humble day at a time. The morning grows brighter. The ancient town slowly disappears beyond the soft mist. The footsteps fade. The church bells become distant. Only silence remains. And with that quiet silence, our journey through the hidden lives of medieval unmarried women gently comes to an end.